In this video, I'm going to show you how to answer a question from an A-level exam, I think by AQA, on circles, and this question was sent to me by a student. So I'm going to just get started by writing down like the general equation for a circle, which is x subtract a squared and y subtract b squared equal to r squared, where the centre of my circle is AB and the radius is R. And I think how I'm going to get started is I'm just going to literally substitute the information from the question. So I can see that the centre is 0, 10 and the radius is root 20. So I'm going to start by substituting x subtract 0 squared plus y subtract 10 squared is equal to the square root of 20 squared. And just to tidy that up a little bit, I'm going to have x squared and y minus 10 squared is equal to 20. Now the question also tells me that there's a line whose equation is y equals mx plus c. And it says in part A that show that the x coordinate of any point of intersection of L and C satisfies a quite intimidating looking equation. So if I know that L and C intersect, so for example, if I had a circle here and if I had a straight line, any place they intersected, of course, the x and y coordinates would be the same. So I know that any point of intersection, the y coordinate is going to be the same in the line and the circle, for example. Now, because I've been told that y is equal to mx plus c, no, it isn't, it's just y equals mx. Every time I see a y in my circle equation, I'm instead going to write an mx. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to substitute y for mx. So I get x squared add mx subtract 10 squared equals 20. Now, if I multiply out the brackets, and again, I really like to remind myself that if I'm squaring a bracket, I'm multiplying it by itself. And if I do that, I get x squared add m squared x squared subtract 20 mx add 100 equals 20. Now, I'm just going to look up to the equation that I've been given in the question. The equation I've been given in the question is equal to 0. And I'm going to kind of ignore everything else, although I do notice that there are x's and m's in my equation, which is good. But I'm going to make my equation equal to 0 now, because then it will look a little bit more like the one in the question. So if I subtract 20 from both sides, I get add 80 equals 0. What I also notice in the equation that they gave me is that there was some brackets, some factorising. So I notice that I can factorise the x squared terms. And if I do that, I'm going to get x squared and 1 add m squared minus 20 mx add 80 equals 0. And I can see that that is the same as the equation in the question. If you want to be really pedantic, and I do like to be pedantic sometimes, I'm going to change it to make it exactly as the one in the question. And I'm just going to write as required at the end, because now I've shown that I knew that that's what I was meant to do. Part B says that I've got to find the values of m for which the equation in part A has equal roots. Okay. So for equal roots, I know that that's to do with the discriminant, and I know that the discriminant of a quadratic equation has to be equal to 0 when it has equal roots. So I'm just going to write that down. I'm going to say for equal roots, b squared minus 4ac is going to be equal to 0. For the equation that I've got, I'm going to be very careful to highlight the values of a and b and c, because it's very easy sometimes to not read correctly the coefficients. So I'm just going to write down the fact that a is equal to 1 plus m squared, b is equal to negative 20m, and c is equal to 80. And now, therefore, I can substitute it into my little formula there, my little b squared minus 4ac equals 0. So I've got to be careful. I've got to square negative 20m, so I'll put that in brackets. Subtract 4 lots of a, 1 plus m squared, multiplied by 80. And I know that's all got to equal 0. Now, before I do any multiplying out brackets, I'm just going to make this a little bit nicer. I know that negative 4 times 80 is negative 320, lots of 1 plus m squared. And then I'm just going to multiply out the brackets. Now I'm going to get 400 m squared here, subtract 320, subtract 320 m squared, and that's going to equal 0. I'm just going to collect like terms here, so I'm going to have 80m squared, subtract 320 is equal to 0. And I think I might just divide by 10, only because I don't really want to reach for my calculator. And I can divide through by 8 there quite nicely. I can see that m squared must be equal to 4, and then I've got to remember that every time I square root a value, I get 2 answers, usually, and therefore m is equal to 2 or m is equal to negative 2. So I think they are the values of m that satisfy that. So as you can see, I have answered the question, and I believe I've got all 6 of the marks there. Thank you very much.